So we've got a real special presentation today. He's also a co-director of the Yale Energy Institute and is trying to help us save the planet with developments in solar energy. And you all are going to get a hands-on today attempt at doing that yourself. And so without anything further, Gary Brudvig.
Okay. Okay, can you hear me? Let's see if this is a pleasure to be here. Maybe since Kurt let in, I'll have to tell you how I got interested in chemistry. Growing up in North Dakota, how many of you been to North Dakota? Anybody? Okay, yeah, a few. Okay, and so if you know North Dakota, there's not a whole lot to do there. But I was interested in rocks and minerals and fossils. But in the Red River Valley, there's mostly just black soil. And so the only place I could find rocks and minerals and fossils were in the rocks that they laid on the train tracks. So I used to walk along the train tracks looking for interesting rocks and minerals. And one day, a train had gone by carrying a load of sulfur. And some sulfur fell off the train and was laying by the train tracks. And I picked up some of the sulfur. And I was about 10 years old. I think, wow, this is pretty neat. What can you do with it? The first thing I found you could do with it is burn it. But my mother wasn't too pleased when I was burning sulfur. Anybody know what you make when you burn sulfur? Sulfur dioxide smells terrible. And so that wasn't, but the next thing I learned is you could make gunpowder out of it. And that's what really got me interested in chemistry and energy. So that's my background in chemistry. So what I'd like to do today is talk about solar energy. And this is a topic of a lot of interest. And I start with this slide from Rick Smalley, a Nobel Prize winner in chemistry. And this is towards the end of his life, he was really pushing energy research. And this is a slide from him listing humanity's top 10 problems in the next 50 years. And number one on the list is energy. We really need to come up with a sustainable process for powering our planet. And so how can we do that? I'd like to talk a little bit today about how we might be able to use solar energy to do that. We use a lot of energy. We use it to drive our cars, heat our houses, use electricity, all kinds of energy. It's about something 7 to 10% of our cost of living comes from energy, and it's a huge contribution. Contributes to about 25% of our trade deficit. So this is a huge part of our society. How much energy do we use? There's that number right up there, 16 terawatts. It probably doesn't mean very much. So you probably know a watt. You have a light bulb, a 100-watt light bulb is burning. That's a measure of power that's being used. And 16 terawatts is 16 trillion watts. And so that's an incredible amount of energy. So I did a little calculation. So imagine you have a 100-watt light bulb. It's about 6 inches long or so. And if you had enough of those 100-watt light bulbs to power this much power, you'd make a string of light bulbs that would go to the moon and back 20 times. That's how much power we're burning. Even that sounds like a mind-boggling amount of distance and power. So this is a huge power. This is a continuous power rate that we've used in the year 2005. We're more than that now. So where does that power come from? Where do we get it? So this is a picture I took out of a Scientific American article. This is a pie chart here, and it shows in each sector what fraction of our energy, where it comes from. So this orange sector here is coal. This brown sector here is oil. That's natural gas. These three are the so-called fossil fuels. We dig them up out of the ground and burn them for power. This sector here is nuclear. That's not got such a good reputation right now, especially with the disaster in Japan. This brown sector here is water power. And see that little sliver there, about 2%? That's renewables, other than hydroelectric. We're hardly using any renewable energy. And just to give you some measure of where solar fits on that, so this 2% is blown up into this pie chart here. And that little sector there is how much solar we're using right now. That's the sliver.
So much.
What's that?
It costs so much.
It's expensive. I'm going to talk about that. Yeah, that's right. So electricity and solar energy electricity from solar energy is expensive. Okay, so why are we using fossil fuel, and where did it come from? So I'd like to start a little bit of a history of oil. So oil was discovered in China, thousands of years, 347 AD. Here's the history. So over the years, we had some oil wells hand dug in Persia, sand oil mined in France, oil produced as byproduct of salt brine wells, and the first successful oil wells drilled in 1859. That actually has some Yale significance. Does anybody know how Yale connects to that first oil well, other than the front row people here? Okay. Benjamin Silliman Jr., professor of chemistry. And this is an inscription that's written on Stirling Chemistry Laboratory, and it was put there in 1955, and 100 years after this report that Benjamin Silliman prepared. He conducted a series of pioneering experiments on the properties and uses of petroleum gathered from springs near Titusville, Pennsylvania. His detailed and optimistic report, completed in April 16, 1855, led to the drilling of the first successful oil well by Edwin Drake at Titusville in 1859 and founding of the modern petroleum industry. He didn't realize that the petroleum industry was a connection founded here at Yale. Here's a picture of that well in 1859. So that was the first oil well in Pennsylvania. So that's we've been using oil and petroleum and other fossil fuels for more than 150 years now. And why do we use so much fossil fuel? Why is it the power that we're using? Well, it's really cheap. Here's the cost on this axis here, and here's a little chart showing the cost of coal, pretty cheap, oil, pretty cheap, biomass, not too bad, electricity, right? Real expensive. So it's much more expensive. So economically, it's really cheap to use coal and oil. And we've got a heck of a lot of it. This is some estimates of oil and gas and coal. These are the proven reserves. These are estimations of how many years of oil we have left, gas and coal. Thousands of years we have fossil fuels to power the planet. It's not going to run out. And despite the fact that people might claim it will run out, there's a lot there. It will get more expensive to mine it, but it's not going to run out. And so this is a conclusion from Nate Lewis, who's the director of the Solar Energy Hub at Caltech, is that these fossil fuels are abundant, they're inexpensive, and they're not going to, and because of that, renewables, which are more expensive, are not going to play a large role in power unless we have technological breakthroughs to make solar energy cheaper, or what is unpriced externality? Basically, we're not paying the full cost of fossil fuels. We're not paying for the environmental effects that they have. And what are those? So how many of you saw Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth or read the book or something? Okay, this is the so-called hockey stick plot here, showing we're burning coal, oil, and natural gas. It produces carbon dioxide. It's going in the atmosphere. And before the Industrial Revolution, it was pretty constant, and it's just taken off. Why is that a problem? Well, have you heard of the greenhouse gas effect? So you have a greenhouse traps the heat inside so it stays warm. And our atmosphere acts like a blanket to keep the heat on the planet. So sunlight comes in, makes it all the way to the ground because it passes through the atmosphere. And now the Earth radiates back heat, but that radiated heat gets trapped in the atmosphere if we have concentrations of these greenhouse gases. And carbon dioxide, one that we're generating by burning all these fossil fuels, is one of the ones that's most significant. Yeah?
What about people? Don't they produce carbon dioxide by breathing out?
Yeah, we do breathe out some carbon dioxide, and that does contribute. And in fact, if we didn't burn all these fossil fuels, we'd be roughly at balance. The plants make oxygen. I'll talk about that in a minute. We breathe oxygen. The plants take up carbon dioxide. We give off carbon dioxide. And it's pretty much in balance. So we're pretty much in balance. And we're upsetting that balance by burning all the coal and oil and natural gas. So that's a good point. Okay, so that's a problem. And there's, of course, I'm not going to talk about it, but there's a huge concern about the effects that this increasing amount of carbon dioxide is going to have on the climate and the environment. There's other aspects of fossil fuels that of course you're all familiar with. There's potential for problems with the mining and production. So you all know about the British petroleum oil spill. Almost exactly a year ago is when that oil spill took place. And this is a pretty interesting picture that I got from a colleague, Tom Moore from Arizona State University. Here's a BP gas station, and here's the sign on the station. You are responsible for your spills. Well, I'm not sure how responsible British Petroleum is, but they're still actually trying to litigate. In fact, just this morning, I was reading in the newspaper that they've been trying to distort the report that came out of that. So that's so we've got environmental effects from production as well. So what can we do? Well, this is from a speech from Barack Obama. It gave about a year ago at Carnegie Mellon. It says, America run solely on fossil fuels should not be the vision we have for our children and grandchildren. And so he discusses how we need to be pushing for renewables, and that's something I'm very much interested in doing. And of course, I'm very happy that the government is now taking the lead to provide funding for this. This is a program that was initiated last year by the Department of Energy to fund the so-called Energy Frontier Research Centers. And 46 of these were funded last year at roughly $20 million each. That's a big increase in research for renewable energy. And you can see, scattered all around the country, a couple of these dots here are from the LR Solar Group, which I'll talk about a little bit more later, is associated with 3 of these energy research centers. And so we're working to try to improve the processes for solar energy conversion. Okay, so with that background, hopefully everybody is on board that we need to think about how renewable energies will contribute. And solar energy is, I think, by many people's estimation, the one source of renewable energy that really has the capacity to power the planet. And I'll talk about that in a minute more. Here's a little cartoon to show Mutz. What you doing, Mooch? I'm trying my hand at photosynthesis. How's it going? You're blocking my lunch. So actually, this is so this little mooch is supposedly photosynthesized. It's not actually completely far-fetched. You may be interested to know that there are sea slugs who have photosynthetic algae that grow underneath their skin, and they come out and crawl on the beach in the daytime and lay in the sun and do photosynthesis. And they, of course, a symbiotic relation. The algae take solar energy, produce sugar and food for the sea slug. The sea slug then swims out in the ocean and gets nutrients that they need as well. So this is it's totally far-fetched. But of course, we're not going to do that. We need to have some kind of a process where we could make something useful. So what about solar energy? So there's an enormous amount of solar energy that strikes the Earth. In fact, there's enough energy in 1 hour of sunlight to power the planet. Remember that number, terawatts, 16 terawatts, the burn rate that we currently have? There's about that much energy striking the surface of the Earth in 1 hour to power the planet. And photosynthesis, in fact, is collecting about 90 terawatts of energy. So, what are why aren't we using more solar energy? Well, there's some big advantages. It's very abundant. It's essentially free. It's everywhere. Low environmental impact, but the disadvantage is that it's very diffuse, meaning it's just very low amount of energy for every amount of space, and it's not constant. It's dark at night. Sometimes it's cloudy like today, and so that's a problem. So we need to come up with ways that make it cheaper. So as you talk about, low cost. So to collect solar. So this is a graph of what we want to shows the sunlight that comes down to the Earth, the blue line here. We need to collect all these wavelengths of solar energy and turn them into something we can use. And so this is a graph of a map of the world, and on this map is color-coded where it's sunny out. The most sun, so the dark orange and yellow colors are where there's lots of sun. Look at Northern Africa, the Sahara Desert, lots of sun there. Australia, lots of sun there. Of course, in the Arctic region, not so much. And so obviously, we'd like to be able to use solar energy where it's most abundant. And if you look on the map here, there's 6 little circles that represent areas of land. And if we use that much land and can convert the sunlight that's striking that area at 10% efficiency, so if we get 10% of the sunlight that hits there, we could produce 18 terawatts. We could produce as much energy as the power to power the entire planet. What's that?
How much time?
We just run it all the time. When the sun is out there, it's using it. So we'd have to have a solar farm in these areas here that would collect the sunlight and make it into something we could use. That doesn't look like it's impossible to do, right? I mean, that's not covering that much of the planet. This needs, it's just expensive right now. Interesting question. So we're not using very much solar energy. Do you know which country has the largest installed solar energy capacity? Who knows which country? What's that? China. Installed solar energy capacity. Germany. Now, why does Germany have so much solar energy? Because the government is subsidizing. But look where Germany is. It's up here. They're blue. That's not the best place to put solar collectors. If we wanted to do something smarter, we'd put it out, where there's more solar energy. Somebody mentioned China, though. China is significant. They are the #1 producer of solar panels, and they are growing very quickly in that area. Okay, so one of the problems, however, with sunlight, and we'll go back to this last map. Here's the Sahara Desert, lots of sun. Nobody lives there, right? Nobody lives in the desert. So you have to transport. If you're going to collect solar energy, transport it where people live, like up in Europe. And transport of electricity in particular, it has transportation losses. And also another big problem is, you've got lots of sunlight here in the daytime, but it's dark at night. And so the sun's not all the time. So how do you store sunlight? Well, if we make electricity can't be stored easily. A good way to store sunlight is to make fuel. And we could have a fuel processor. For example, you could make electricity and use electrolysis and give us storage that allows us to make fuel that could power cars or buses, or you could make electricity again using fuel cells. So that's what we'd like to be able to do, something like that. And so here's sort of an idea of how we could convert sunlight. We've got sunlight coming in. We've got some device that can make electricity. We already have solar cells that can make electricity. And ideally, we could make fuel. And so I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about how processes of fuel production happen in photosynthesis. That's what photosynthesis does. It makes fuel using sunlight. And then I'll end by talking about solar cells, how electricity is made. And you see all this stuff up here? We're going to have an activity at the end where everybody is going to make their own solar cell. If you want to come down, we've got enough to everybody to do that. And you can see over here we've got some different colored materials, raspberries and spinach and beets and so on. Of course, to collect sunlight, you have to absorb the light, and so you need something colored. So we're going to make solar cells here. These will make electricity. But as I said, and we already have solar cells, but they're kind of expensive. That's the problem, and electricity can't be stored. So we'd like to understand from nature, how do you make fuel, and could we do that in an efficient way with an artificial process, sort of like this? We can make a fuel like hydrogen, for example. So how do you do that? So for solar energy conversion, first of all, you have to collect it. You need something that absorbs light. It has to be colored, right? So we've got stuff over here like beets. It absorbs lots of the sunlight if you've got something really colored like beets. And so that's the collection part. We need solar cells that will collect light. So what color are solar cells? If you've seen Kroon Hall has solar cells on the roof. What color are those solar cells? Blue. I think they're not, maybe really, really dark blue. They're really pretty black. And why are they black? Yeah. Right. They're black because they absorb all the light and there's all the visible light. That's what you want to do. Collection. You want to collect all the light. So that's the important first part, is you need to do that well. And that solar cells do. They're black, and so they absorb all the light. Yeah.
If you put a piece of black paper around a can and put it in the sunlight in the summertime, and it's really sunny out, then you'll notice that a while later the can is hot.
Yeah. If you put, that's right, you put black paper, or it'll absorb sun and it'll get hot. Of course, that's making heat. Heat's not what we really want. We want to make something that we can use, and heat isn't so. Actually, solar cells get hot too, but that's not something that we'd like them to do. We'd like them to make electricity. So okay, so then you have to collect the light. Then you have to do some kind of conversion. What solar cells do and what all kinds of solar energy conversion processes involve. What I'll just go. They take and make a charge separation. That is, electrons move. It makes electricity, and so that even in plants, that's what happens. And then that electricity has to be converted some way. So photosynthesis is using the electricity to make fuel, and solar cells are using that just making electricity. So we'll say a little bit about how these processes work. I'm going to say, how can we design a system to do solar energy conversion? Well, we can learn from nature. Chlorophyll. This is a picture of the planet now, but it was taken in color here now so that we can see where plants are growing. See this green area here, northern North America, on the East Coast. Lots of things growing there. What's going on over here? Why isn't it so green there? Yeah. That's a desert there. Not so many plants are growing. Look at the Sahara Desert. Not much is growing there either. So this is on land. Look at it in the ocean. There's lots of photosynthesis in the ocean. Yeah. Algae. Yeah. This green here is from algae growing in the ocean. Why isn't there so much growing out in these parts of the ocean? Yeah. Well, algae don't have roots though. They just float around in the water. But it's actually a little. You're on the right track. Yeah. No, there's plenty of sun out here. Yeah. Cold, well, temperature is but actually look up here. That's pretty cold and it's not stopping it. Yeah. Waves, there's pretty much waves everywhere. It's not, yeah. No, yeah. There's currents, but that's good actually because then things can, mix. Yeah. Yeah, actually, these algae get eaten everywhere. that's what. Yeah. What's that? Well, there's salt water, but that's actually fine. There's salt water is here too. Let me show you something here. Look at this green that's sticking out from Africa here and here. Do you know what happens in Africa? The wind comes across the Sahara Desert. It picks up dust, and it blows it out in the ocean. Does that give anybody a clue as to what's going on? Yeah.
The alligators don't eat them?
No. So what is it picking up and blowing in that dust? It's picking up nutrients. Yeah, it's picking up nutrients. And so here you got more nutrients, and out here there's not enough nutrients. So there's actually kind of interesting. One of the ideas for carbon dioxide absorption into the ocean is to fertilize the oceans. And I think this is kind of a crazy crackpot idea, but there is actually a proposal. Let's go fertilize the ocean and make more algae grow. The problem with that, the algae grow, but then something else eats them, and they'll just, it doesn't really amount to too much. So photosynthesis is actually, really using light a lot, and we'd like to understand how that works. And so what are plants doing? They're taking energy from the sun, and they're making it into food or chemical energy. Food is chemical energy, right? If you ate a donut out there, there was this great program, The Ascent of Man, and Jacob Bronowski, and he talked about energy in terms of jelly donut units. And he talked about the Tour de France racers. Every day, they'd use lots of energy to race their bikes, and they'd have to eat a certain number of jelly donuts to make that, resupply that energy. So those jelly donuts have chemical energy, and what photosynthesis is doing is taking low energy chemicals, like water and carbon dioxide, and turning them into high energy chemicals that we can use for food. That's what photosynthesis does. Now, I'm not. This is a little more technical, but what this is basically taking these chemicals that are low energy and turning them into ones we can burn, like hydrogen. That's a fuel. So we need to think about, how can we, for example, split water to make a fuel? We need to have a source of a chemical that we could use and something that could be turned into fuel. And one way that we could do that is to split water. And photosynthesis, that's what photosynthesis does. Nature learned a long, long time ago that water is a good thing to use for production of fuel. And so this is the reaction that happens. Carbon dioxide, CO2, water, H2O are being combined. Those are two chemicals, low energy chemicals find in the environment. And they make fuel. Carbon, this is biomass, and oxygen, which is released into the atmosphere. Yeah, that's photosynthesis. And you can see the oxygen. Here's a picture. I don't know if you know these aquarium plants, Elodia. Here's a picture of Elodia. Look at the bubbles of oxygen. You can shine light on them. Oxygen's bubbling off. You can actually see the bubbles streaming out. And so if we look at the Earth's history, these can be measured from the geologic rocks. How much oxygen was in the atmosphere as a function of the time before the present. So the Earth was created about 4.6 billion years ago. The oldest rocks are about 4 billion years old. And starting about 2.3 billion, you start to see that there's oxygen. And it grew to a current amount. The atmosphere has about 21% oxygen in it right now. We breathe that oxygen. This production of oxygen that happened by photosynthesis, of course, animals start to be possible. You couldn't have animals until you had oxygen, because animals need to breathe oxygen in order to carry out their metabolism. So here's the process. Carbon dioxide, water, low energy chemicals, very abundant in the environment, are being converted to fixed carbon, biomass, high energy compounds. And this is a waste product of photosynthesis, actually, the oxygen. And that's being released into the atmosphere. Now this fixed...
That's like when we breathe out.
We breathe out, we go the other direction. We make carbon dioxide and water from the food we eat.
We breathe out what plants breathe in. And
That's right.
Plants breathe in what we breathe out.
That's right. These two directions, photosynthesis goes this direction. Metabolism, what we do, goes the other direction. So over the Earth's history, there's been excess. More oxygen has been produced than has been used, and so there's accumulated in the atmosphere, and that's balanced by all this biomass that's buried in the ground, and that's the fossil fuels that we're burning. Yeah?
Why shouldn't the plants balance out the carbon dioxide in the air?
They do. Right now we're pretty much balanced. And you can see the oxygen in the atmosphere hasn't changed for a long time. That's because we're pretty much in balance right now. Although we're trying to make it go back again the other way, because we're taking these fossil fuels and burning them. And we burn them, we're using up some oxygen when we burn them. We haven't done enough yet to change the atmosphere. The atmosphere oxygen still is 21%. But that could be. So I did this amount of oxygen, 21%. That corresponds to water that's been used up. And that amount of water would lower the ocean level by 4.8 meters. That's how much oxygen is actually, the oxygen in the atmosphere required that much water to produce it. This has happened on a huge scale over the Earth's history. So one part of my research group, and I won't go into any real detail about this, has been to study the processes happening in plants. So here's a leaf. If we take a little picture of a leaf and look at a single cell, here's a single cell in a plant. And inside those cells are these green organelles called chloroplasts. Here's a picture of a chloroplast, and it has these little structures, membrane structures, that have all these protein complexes that have chlorophyll. They're the green components that absorb light and do the photosynthesis. So we grind up spinach, and in our lab, you isolate it. There's some ground up spinach up here, not ground up quite as gently as we would do in the lab, but nonetheless ground up. And we try to figure out what's going on in photosynthesis, in these processes here. And we'd like to learn from nature, how can you collect solar energy? How can you make fuel from solar energy? And if we can understand that, the idea, the hope is that we can apply those principles to artificial processes whereby we could make efficient devices that could make fuel from solar energy. And it's not a new idea. This is an article that was written in Science in 1912, 99 years ago, by the scientist Giacomo Cimician. And I'll just read this to you. It's amazingly foresighted, nearly 100 years ago. It says, on the arid lands there will spring up industrial colonies without smoke and without smokestacks. Forests of glass tubes will extend over the plains, and glass buildings will rise everywhere. And inside of these will take place the photochemical processes that hitherto have been the guarded secrets of plants. But they will have been mastered by human industry, which will know how to make them bear even more abundant fruit than nature. And so, for nature is not in a hurry, and mankind is. Well, that was 100 years ago. We still don't know how to do it. He spent his entire life researching this, and it's been an area of a lot of interest, but we still have a lot to learn. And this is an area that we're working on in the chemistry department, and this is my our solar group. Victor Batista works with us, Bob Crabtree, and Charlie Schmittenmeyer, and the four of us have been working as a team for about 5 years now to try to do this, to try to make fuel using sunlight and trying to reproduce the processes in nature. So I'll call this bio-inspired. So we're going to be inspired by nature to try to develop processes that will work to make fuel. So I won't go into any great detail, but basically what nature does is uses light. So these little lightning bolts are supposed to be light. And it uses light, it collects it by using chlorophylls, molecules that can absorb light. It moves electrons, makes electricity, and electricity is used for fuel-forming reactions and water-splitting reactions. So we're going to try to do that same thing, but we're not going to use chlorophyll, and we're not going to use the kind of proteins and biological molecules, but we're going to use titanium dioxide. Titanium, we're going to see that. We're going to use this in our solar cells. Titanium dioxide is like white paint. Really cheap, abundant, and it also has the property that we can use it in solar cells. So we're going to try to do that in a very similar way to use light to do fuel formation reactions and water splitting reactions. And I'll call this bio-inspired artificial photosynthesis. That's where our research program is geared at.
In terms of efficiency compared to the natural photosynthesis?
Natural photosynthesis efficiency actually is not that high. That's an interesting question. We just had a workshop last year to talk about really what is the efficiency here. It's not that good. Actually, if you just grow plants in the field, grow crops and harvest them, the overall solar energy conversion efficiency is less than 1%. So they're not very good. You can make artificial systems that, and we're hoping that these that could be have efficiencies better than 10%. They don't exist yet. That's the research that we were doing, but in principle that could be done. And this is inspired, the use of titanium dioxide is inspired by work that was done on the so-called dye-sensitized solar cells, and we're going to make those. So this is my last slide. I'm going to show you how you can make electricity with solar energy using these. So they use this titanium dioxide material. Titanium dioxide, as I said, is in white paint. How many of you brushed your teeth this morning with toothpaste? Okay, if you swallowed any of that, you ate some titanium dioxide this morning because the filler in toothpaste is titanium dioxide. So it's pretty abundant. It's not toxic, and it has the good property that if you that it can be used in a solar cell. But titanium dioxide is white. What does that mean about absorbing light? It doesn't absorb light because it's white, and so that's bad for solar cells. So how can you make it absorb light? Yeah. You could put paint on it. Put some paint on it, right? That's what a dye is. Dye is the paint. We're going to paint this titanium dioxide with chemicals. This is the one that's used in the commercial dye-sensitized solar cells, this complicated molecule. And this is what one of those solar cells look like. It's got this red color.
Why can't it be black?
It should be black. Good point. It should be black. We need to find molecules that are black and work on these. And actually, they're not. The best one is actually called black dye. That's the one that works the best. This one's actually red dye, so it's not quite black yet. But and so we're going to make these. I want to just give a brief introduction to what they are and how they work, and then I'm going to turn it over to some of my group to introduce it further. But what this titanium dioxide, this layer on the surface is supposed to be white, and you put a dye on the surface, and it sticks all over the surface. So you sensitize it by sticking the dye all over the surface. Now the dye can absorb light, and what is, if it works properly, when it absorbs light, it will make electricity. You can light a light bulb, And that electricity will be moved over to form a complete circuit, we have to move the current back again to have a complete cycle. And there's a solution that sits inside of these solar cells that has iodine in it. Now you're all too young, but when I was a kid, we used to have when we got a cut, we had to get iodine put on the cut to prevent getting infection. You know, so this iodine here, you'll use it when you make your solar cell. It's sort of this sort of orange color. Don't want to put it on your cuts, but that allows the complete circuit. And so what we're going to do when we make these solar cells is we're going to take one slide here that's going to be put on glass slides that's got titanium on it, titanium dioxide on it. We're going to stain it. We've got stuff over here that can stain it. You can choose what you like. Then we're going to put this iodide solution on it. And we're going to put another sandwich of another glass slide. And we're going to make a sandwich that, if it works right, is going to make electricity when we shine light on it. So that's what we're going to do. And the plan is to have groups. So I think we've got 37 stations. And I'm going to turn it over now to my group members who are going to introduce how you make these. And we're going to pass out some instructions. And then once we go through an introduction of how you're going to make, we're going to invite everybody to come down and make a solar cell. So I want to introduce Carrie Young. She's a graduate student in my group, and she's done really all the work. You know, I just stand up here and talk, and she's the one that did all the work to put the solar cells together, and she also is going to tell you a little bit about how to make the solar cells. Okay. Now, what happened to the microphone? Oh, there it is. Okay. Okay, and maybe before Carrie gets started, let me introduce the others who are going to help us. Okay, over here in yellow is Lauren Martini. She's a graduate student working with our solar group. Gazda Ulis, Gary Moore, and Lawrence Kai. Lawrence is an undergraduate student in our group, and Gary is a postdoc. And this one will advance it, or if you push the down. And I'll turn it over to Carrie, and she can tell you how to make solar cells, and we can get started.
Hello, everyone. As Gary said, I am here to explain to you how to make solar cells. We're currently passing around the instructions for that, and so the way this is going to work, I'm going to go through the whole process, and you can follow along on your sheets, and then we'll divide into groups and come up and get started.
That's your instruction.
So I'll give just a second for the sheets to catch up with everybody. So here's sort of the overview while we're waiting. We'll have some Petri dishes with little slides in them, and you can see here our lovely assistants are worked out the details. Okay, I think we're getting pretty close. So there are 4 steps to making a solar cell, and the first one on your instruction sheet says sensitize your anode, which is chemistry speak for color your titanium dioxide. So you'll have a little piece of glass that has some white stuff on it, and the first thing you need to do is choose a dye. So a dye is basically anything that has a color. And something that you encounter in your daily life that has a color are fruits and vegetables. So we have a variety of fruits and vegetables that you can use to dye your solar cells. Please don't eat our dyes. And or alternatively, if you'd like, we have a couple of colored markers, which are also things in your daily life that are colored. So you'll choose a dye, and if you choose a fruit dye, then you'll add a little bit to the shallow part of your dish. And then you'll just smush your titanium dioxide covered, your white covered slide down into your dye to let the colored molecules sort of get all over the titanium dioxide and stain it. So what is this white stuff? As Gary mentioned, the white solid is titanium dioxide, which is really good for moving the electrons to make electricity, but not so good for absorbing light. We went ahead and made your titanium dioxide slides for you because we start out and we make the little rectangles, and then we have to heat them in an oven. And we decided that you didn't really want to wait for that. So, and the reason that we do that is to go from little particles to a nice smooth surface. And so then we let them cool, and then they're ready to go. So once you've smushed your titanium dioxide slide in your dye for about 5 minutes, you can rinse it off and get all of the extra fruit off your slide. And then just let that dry. So then you have the first piece of your solar cell. So the second step says prepare your cathode, which basically means make your other electrode. And you'll find in your little kit a blank slide that has a letter Y on it, and there's a picture of that drawn on your instruction sheet. The slides have one side is different from the other side, but it's hard to see that. So we have the Y on there so that if you line that up, then you'll know that you have the right side facing up. Once you do that, then you can use a pencil to color in a rectangle, just like the rectangle on your instruction sheet. And so we're basically using pencil lead, which is graphite, as an electrode material, kind of like the titanium dioxide, but opposite, if that makes any sense. Don't worry about staying inside the lines, just make sure that there's a nice dark layer that's about the size of the rectangle on your sheet. The third step is to bring it together, and we're basically going to make a solar cell sandwich. So you'll have 2 electrodes ready to go. On your colored TiO2 slide, you'll add a few drops of that iodine electrolyte that Gary was talking about, and so that's kind of like the filling. And then you'll add the other bread, the electrode, the piece of glass from step 2, and you'll want to arrange them so that they're kind of offset, so that the edges are sticking out. So now we have our solar cell sandwich. And then in your kit there are a couple of binder clips, and you can use that to hold the whole thing together so that it doesn't come apart. We recommend finding some teamwork for this. It can be a little tricky. And so then you have completed making a solar cell. Once you have your solar cell complete, then you can use a multimeter to connect a red lead to one side and a black lead to the other side. And we're happy to help you with this if that's tricky. You'll turn your multimeter to where it says VDC. And then we have a lamp here. You can place your solar cell under the lamp or take it outside. And the multimeter will read the voltage of your solar cell, which is correlated to the amount of power that it produces under the light. So by the end of today, hopefully all of you will get a chance to make a little bit of power from sunlight. And obviously, the higher the number, the better. So the number to beat is 357.1. If you can do better than us, then.
Better tell them about which side to put the clip on.
Okay, so we learned something from this. So you want to you have these little can be hard to see here, where you arrange the solar cell so that it was sort of slip stacked. You want the metal piece to go on the same side that you had the titanium dioxide or the graphite. So if this is confusing, then just ask us, and we'll be happy to help. So with that, that's basically the steps for making a solar cell. There are probably a little more than 100 of you, and so you'll want to form groups of maybe about 3 or 4 people that you can work with, and we have a bunch of kits here. We're also scientists, and we know how important safety is while we're doing scientific experiments. So the first thing that you should do is find your group, and then you can come up over here to this corner of the room, and we have some safety goggles and some gloves. And then you can grab a solar kit, spread out here on the bench, and get to work making your solar cell. Just one moment. We have a question.
So what was your first record?
So the one that we made was 357.1.
So before the chaos ensues.
Before the chaos.
I think I was going to say, okay. Before the chaos ensues, I'd like to.
Wait. Everybody over here.
The chaos has ensued. I was going to say, before the chaos ensues, it'd be nice to thank Professor Brudvig for the great talk.